Welcome to Photoshop 7 for Beginners, brought to you by ComputerLearningZone.com. My name is Richard Rost. This is an older course covering Photoshop 7. I released it several years ago. Lately, I've been going through my library of older courses and putting them on YouTube absolutely free of charge. I know a lot of people still use older versions of software, and these tutorials are still helpful to a lot of people. You'll find many of the features and functions in Photoshop still haven't changed. If you'd like to see me update my tutorials for the latest version of Photoshop, post a comment below. Over the past couple years, I've been focused more on Microsoft Office products, mostly Access and Excel. But I used to love doing Photoshop classes, and I'd like to do it in the future if there's enough interest. So sit back and relax and enjoy Photoshop 7 for Beginners, brought to you by Computer Learning Zone.
Welcome to Photoshop 101, Introduction to Photoshop, brought to you by 599cd.com. I am your instructor, Richard Rost. In today's class, we're going to learn about the different parts of Photoshop, how to open images, creating new images. We'll learn how to use the brush tools, how to change colors. We'll see how to edit images, add text to your images. We'll teach you about layers and how they work. And we'll go over some of Photoshop's selection tools. Before taking this course, we recommend you take our Windows 101 Introduction to PCs course and either our Windows 102 Intro to Windows 98 or Windows 110 Intro to Windows XP courses. This course is designed for Adobe Photoshop 7. We will also be using Windows XP in this class, but it does not matter which version of Windows you have. Our goal for today's class is to get you up and running editing graphics quickly in about an hour. There's a lot of theory that we're going to skip in today's class, and we'll come back to it in future lessons. In today's class, we're going to focus on being productive quickly. We're going to open up some graphics, show you how to use some of the basic tools, and teach you how to make changes to your graphics. There are literally hundreds of ways you can edit graphics, apply filters, work with layers, change your tools, edit your colors. We'll cover those as needed. We're going to start off basic today, and in future lessons we'll get more complex as we go on with different projects. When learning with a 599 CD course, we recommend you watch each lesson completely through from start to finish. Focus on the material in that lesson. Then, watch the lesson again, following along with the examples on your computer. Some students like to watch the entire course from start to finish, and then go back through each lesson again and follow along with each lesson. Whichever way you choose, you will benefit from watching the lesson first and then following along with the examples. What is Photoshop? Photoshop is an image editing program used by computer novices and professional graphics designers worldwide. Photoshop is best used for editing existing graphics. While you can use Photoshop to create new graphics, it is most commonly used to edit, modify, or fix existing graphics, both for print and on the web. Let's go over the parts of the Photoshop screen or user interface. When you first open up Photoshop, you'll see a lot of stuff on the screen. Now don't panic. Although there's a lot of information here and a lot of different buttons and menu items and icons, we're going to go over just the ones that you need to get started. Let's talk about the different parts of the screen. Like most standard Windows applications, across the very top of the screen we have our title bar that says Adobe Photoshop. We have our menu bar. We have File, Edit, Image, Layer. We'll talk about these menu bars and some of the options on them in a little bit. Below the menu bar, we have the Options bar. Now the Options bar will change depending on what you're doing, depending on what tool you're using. The tools are all over here in this thing called the toolbox. And here you can see we have the Move tool, we have a rectangular marquee tool, a lasso tool. We're going to learn about some of these tools today. Over to the right side of the screen, we have our standard minimize, maximize, and close buttons. Down below that, we have a series of palettes that are open. Here's one that says Info. Down below that, there's one that says Navigator. If we continue below, we have a color palette, a history palette, a layers palette. All of these palettes have different functions, and we'll talk about those some a little bit later today in class. Now back up to the top of the screen, we have this area here called the palette well. And you can actually take those palettes and stick them up here into the well to get them out of the way. Now personally, I like to do that. I don't like having all these different palettes open on the screen at once. So let's go ahead and take some of these palettes and put them up into the palette well. To move one of the palettes up to the palette well, click on the little arrow right here and select Dock to Palette Well. So let's move the Info palette up into the palette well. Let's do the same thing for the Navigator palette. Click on the arrow and select Dock to Palette Well. Now the other palettes that are open, let's take them and slide them up to the top of the screen. So I'm going to click on the title bar here, this purple area. It may be a different color on your screen. Mine is purple. I'm going to click and drag it up to the top. And there we go. Now I don't want to put this on the palette well because I might want to use the color palette in a few minutes. But I don't need to see the whole thing right now. So I'm going to click on this little minimize button here, and that'll shrink the palette up. Let's do the same thing for these other two palettes. Let's click on the history palette and drag it up to the top. But you know what? I don't really need the history palette right now, so I'm going to close it. Let's just go ahead and click on the X right here to close the history palette. Now the history palette is gone. I don't need to see it right now, so I'm going to close it. If you decide later that you want to get a palette back that you've closed, just come over to the menu bar and click on Window, and you can come down here and click on History, and you'll see your palette is back again. But for now, let's go ahead and close it. Let's go ahead and close the Layers palette as well. We don't need that right now. Now one thing that you won't see right now on the screen when you open up Photoshop to begin with is you won't see an area for your image. That's because most of the time when people use Photoshop, they are editing existing images. So Photoshop does not open up a blank image for you, much like Microsoft Word opens up a blank document or Excel opens up a blank spreadsheet. When you do have an image open, it will appear here in the center of the Photoshop interface, and a standard window that you can minimize, maximize, or close. Also notice at the very bottom of the screen there is a status bar that has some other information in it. We'll talk more about the status bar a little bit later on. So now you know about the different parts of the Photoshop interface, the menu bar, the options bar, the toolbar, the different palettes, how to dock the palettes into the palette well, and how to minimize and close the palettes. In this lesson, we're going to learn how to open images in Photoshop. Now with Photoshop, Adobe installs some sample images for you to use. They're located in your Program Files folder under Adobe, Photoshop 7, and then Samples. Let's see if we can find these sample photos now. From inside of Photoshop, let's click on File, and then Open. The Open dialog box will appear. Now you may start out in your My Documents folder, or you might even start off on your desktop. But we need to find our C Program Files Adobe Photoshop 7 Samples folder. So how are we going to do that? Well, the easiest way to get there is to come over here and click on My Computer. Or you can drop down this box over here and look for My Computer that way. I'm going to come over here and click on My Computer. Now you'll see all of your drive letters, your A drive, your C drive, and whatever other drives you might have. Let's go ahead and click on your C drive. Now I'm assuming, of course, that you've installed Photoshop to your C drive. If you've installed it to a different drive, you may have to go to a different drive letter. So let's open up our C drive. And now let's click on a Program Files folder. And now click on the Adobe folder. Here's Photoshop 7 and the Samples folder. And here are the sample graphics that Adobe installs with Photoshop. Let's click on my favorite image here, Ducky. Notice down at the bottom you'll see a sample of Ducky. Let's go ahead and click on the Open button. And now you'll see that Ducky has opened inside of Photoshop. Now one of my pet peeves is that the image usually opens up behind the toolbox. So I'm going to click on the title bar and slide it over to the right here a little bit. And there's Ducky. Now that we've got Ducky open, let's go ahead and close him. So click on the X right here, and that will close Ducky. Now using File Open is one way to open up a graphic. There is a better way, however. Let's click on File and then Browse. This opens up the File Browser window. Now the File Browser is a very powerful way to find your graphics. Notice up here on the left-hand side, we have our Samples folder. That's where we are. You can click on other folders if you'd like to navigate around your hard drive. Over to the right here, we can see our path and file that we're located on. And if we click on one of these samples, like Ducky, you'll see over here it loads a sample image up into this pane, and down below it gives you all the information about Ducky. The file name, the date it was created, modified, and all that information. We can easily scroll through all of the photos in this folder by simply clicking on the scroll bar. Let's go ahead and select one of these other photos, like Waterfall, and then double-click on it to open it. And there's Waterfall. Now notice the file browser stays open in the background. So we can either close it, minimize it, or stick it up in the palette well. I'm going to stick it up in the palette well. So I'll click on the arrow and say Dock to Palette Well, which is where the file browser actually started out. Now if you want to use the file browser in the future, instead of clicking on File and then Browse, you can simply click on the file browser here in the palette well. And notice how the file browser opens up right here below the palette well. When you're done, just simply click on the tab again, and that'll hide it. Let's go ahead now and close the waterfall picture. And I want to go back to working with Ducky, but I don't want to have to open up and browse for him and find Ducky again. So I can click on File, Open Recent, and here you can see all the recent files that I've worked with. Waterfall, and there's Ducky. So I'll click on Ducky, and there's Ducky again. That's how you can open up recent files that you've worked with. And one last time, let's go ahead and close Ducky down. In this lesson, we're going to go over creating a new image from scratch. We want to create a new image so we can play around with some of the tools and see some of the different options in Photoshop. So let's click on File and then New. The New File dialog box is opened. Let's give our file a name. Let's call it Rick's Sample Image. And you can type in whatever you want for a name. Here we have the image. Now the preset sizes, there's a bunch of different preset sizes in here. There's letter and legal and tabloid and a bunch of different sizes. Let's just stick to the default Photoshop size for now. We'll talk more about these sizes later. The default size, 7 by 5. Resolution, 72 pixels per inch. Again, we'll talk about resolution later on. The mode, let's stick with RGB color. There's a bunch of different modes in here. The contents, we have white, background color, and transparent. Let's stick with white for now. That's the contents. The background go ahead and click on OK. And here we now have our Rick's sample image. Let's start out by drawing something simple. So come over to the toolbox and find this tool right here. It's the brush tool. Now notice if you hold your mouse over a tool, if you're not sure what it is, a little tooltip pops up to tell you what it is. That's the healing brush tool. That's the slice tool. There's a clone stamp tool. Don't worry about what all the tools are right now. For now, just find the brush tool. Now if you can't find the brush tool, right here, see how it says brush and pencil? If you hold down that button, if you see a pencil tool there, that's okay too. Just click and hold down the button over the pencil tool and find the brush tool. Now when I pick brush, I get this circle popping up here. Now again, if you've been playing with Photoshop, you might not have exactly what I have on the screen. But my brush is currently set to a big fat circle. And if I click and drag, I get that on the screen. I'm currently set to a black airbrush. Again, your results may be slightly different. Now let's see about some of the options for the brush tool. Let's come up here in the options bar and see this little down arrow here all the way to the left? It says click to open the tool preset picker. Go ahead and click on that and you'll see some different preset brush settings. We have airbrush soft round 50% flow. What is that? Well, go ahead and click on that and notice some of your settings above changed. The brush setting changed here to 45, for example. Let's double click on it to select that tool. Notice how my brush size is now smaller. And if I click and drag, I get a smaller airbrush setting. Let's see about some of those other ones. Let's drop this down. Here we have paintbrush oval 45 pixels multiply. What's all that about? Well, let's click on it and notice some of these other settings changed here. The brush, the mode change, the opacity change. We'll talk about this in just a minute. Let's double click on this one to make that selection. And notice again my brush changed. Let's click and drag and look at that. That's interesting. Let's try another one. Drop this down. A transparent red spray paint. That could be interesting. Now notice when I click on this, down here in my toolbox, my color changed. This is the box for the foreground color, and this is the box for the background color. And when I clicked on the transparent red spray paint, it changed my color to red. And let's see how it works. Click and drag, and there's some red spray paint. Now those options are fine and dandy if you want to use some of the built-in brushes. Let's see about setting our own brush up. So I'm going to come back over here to the tool preset picker, and I'm going to go with the paintbrush oval 45 pixels. Let's go with that one. Double click on it. Now, here's all the brush settings right here. Drop this box down, and here are all the different types of brushes. We have real thin ones, a little bit thicker. Notice the size here, 3 pixels, 1 pixel, really tiny. A pixel is a dot on the screen. Hard round, 5 pixels, and so on. We can scroll down. Here's some even fatter ones, 19 pixels. Notice how the next ones have fuzzy edges around them, right? Soft round versus the ones up here. These are hard round. They don't have fuzzy images. All right, we can continue scrolling down. Here are some other types of brushes. Spatter. You can see over here the spatter pattern. All right, and you can continue to scroll down and look at all the different types of brushes that are in here. And there are even more than this available. I'm going to come up top here and pick 5 pixels hard. Let's go with that one. Now you can come up top here and change this slider to change the size of your brush manually. 28 pixels, 13 pixels, and so on. I'm going to go to about, let's go to about 10 pixels. I'm going to click on this little down arrow here, and then draw. And there we go. I've got like a light pink going on. Now my color down below here is still set to red, so why is this kind of like a light pink? Well, that's where the opacity comes in. Notice up top here we have opacity, or opacity. If we change this to something a little bit more, let's say 100%, notice what happens now when I draw. It's more opaque. It's less transparent. If I drop this down to, say, 10% or lower, notice how it's real transparent. Just the opacity. Don't like that color red? That's fine. Come over here and click on the foreground color. And here we have the color picker that opens up. Now you can see you can select from a wide palette of colors, the full spectrum of the rainbow. And here's how I do it. First, determine whether you want red, blue, green, or whatever by sliding these bars up and down. I'm just going to click in here, and you can slide this up or down. Let's go to like a light blue. Now once you've got this right about where you want it, you can come over here and click to fine-tune your color. And you can see over here, this is the color that we were on. This is the color that we're going to have. So let's go here. Let's go a little bit darker. Let's come down here and click more toward the darkness. Now over here you'll see all your different settings, your red, your green, your blue, your hue, saturation, brightness, and all this stuff. If you are a professional graphics designer, you'll understand what all this means. For the rest of us, we'll cover this in a more advanced class. But for now, all you have to do is select your color here, and then your brightness. This is more toward the white end. This, of course, is more toward the dark end. Let's go with like a middle blue, something around there. When you're happy with your color, go ahead and click on OK. And now notice my color has changed. And I can click and drag. And wait a minute, that's not exactly the color that I have over here. Oh, I forgot my opacity setting. Let's make sure we come up top here and make it opaque. So I'll come over here, set that to 100, and there's my blue that I've got. Now notice as I'm drawing, it's not quite changing the color behind it exactly right. Notice if I paint over here, it's blue, but as I go over the red, it changes slightly, and as I go over the black, it's dark. What's happening here is the mode is set to multiply, and multiply means it's going to multiply or kind of work together the results of those two colors. If you want to force that color to be solid, then you want to drop down the mode box and select normal. And then notice if I drag, I get that exact color all the way across. So just keep that in mind. Multiply will give you an effect that is more like a real brush. Now you can also change colors using the color palette. Let's drag that color palette over. Now if I move my mouse over the color palette, notice how my mouse turns into a little eyedropper. And I can click, and that'll give me a green color, or I can click here, and that'll pick up yellow. If you restore this palette to its normal size, you can see here you can also adjust the red, green, and blue. Click on the Swatches tab. The Swatches tab gives you a more realistic palette you can pick from. Here's green, or here's a red, and so on. So let's minimize that again and slide it out of the way. Now, speaking of eyedroppers, there's also an eyedropper tool on the toolbox. And the eyedropper tool is very useful if you want to pick up a color that's on the picture somewhere else. For example, let's say I want to match this exact shade of red. I can click on the eyedropper tool and then pick up red, or I can pick up that blue or that pink. And notice how the foreground color changes to whatever I click on. So if I want to match a color, I use the eyedropper tool, and then I switch back to my brush. Eyedropper, red for example, switch back to my brush. And there we go. Now that we're done playing around with the sample image, let's go ahead and close it by clicking on the X here. And we're asked if we want to save changes to this before closing. Let's say no. This was just a sample image to play around with. I'm going to click on no. And now I'm back to a blank Photoshop. Now that we know how to create a new image and use some of the tools like the brush and the eyedropper, let's open up an existing image and see how we can edit it. Let's go back and open up that image of Ducky. So I'm going to click on File, and then Open Recent, and then Ducky. Now Ducky shows up here because, again, we opened it up in an earlier lesson. If not, you'd have to click on File and then Open, or use the file browser to find Ducky. Let's go ahead and open Ducky up. Now the first thing that I'd like to do with Ducky is get rid of some of this shadow underneath here. Notice how his breast is a nice bright yellow, but under his neck we've got a little bit of a shadow. I want to try and get rid of some of that. So what I'd like to do is use the eyedropper tool to pick up some of this lighter yellow and then brush over this area over here. So let's start by using the eyedropper tool. And I'm going to click right about here to pick up some of that yellow. And I'll go back to my brush tool. And I can come over here. And, oh, wait a minute, what's going on? Oh, I've got the multiply effect on. So what's happening is it's kind of meshing this together with that shadowed color. All right, so we need to undo that. We need to go back to the way that Ducky looked before I made that goof. Now, if you're familiar with other Microsoft or Windows applications, you can click on Edit and then Undo Brush Tool. And that will undo that mistake. But Photoshop only lets you undo one thing at a time. So if I were to have, let's say, done this, and then I came over here and did some of this over here, and then maybe I did it over here as well, I've got a couple of goofs. If I hit undo, edit, undo. Undo is also Control Z. All right, I got rid of one of them, the last one. Then I go edit, undo again. Oh, wait a minute. Now it says redo brush tool. You can only undo once and then redo to put it back. So if you want to go back several mistakes, you have to use this thing called step backwards, and it's also Alt-Control-Z. So I'll hit step backwards, and it steps back off of that one. Edit, step backwards again, and it gets rid of the second last one that I did. And then edit, step backwards again, and it goes back yet one more step. So it's slightly different from most other Windows applications like Word and Excel. We have undo, which undoes one thing, and then we have the step backward and step forward as well. If I decide I want to step forward, I can step forward, and that puts back the last thing that I stepped backwards over. And again, keep in mind the keyboard shortcuts for these, because you'll find that it's easier than always going back up to the menus. Step backwards is Alt-Control-Z, and step forwards is Shift-Control-Z. And if you can't remember what they are, you can come up here and look on the menu. One other feature that's nice is revert. Let's say that you make a whole bunch of changes. You do this, you do this, you add some stuff, put some hair on Ducky. And then you decide you don't want to keep any of those changes, but you don't want to step back through all of them. You can click on File and then Revert. And that will make Ducky revert back to his original state. It'll basically reload the picture fresh and drop all of your changes. So now that we know about undo and step backward and revert, let's go back to our original problem, getting rid of some of this shadow under here. Eyedropper again. Let's make sure we got the right yellow. Let's go back to our brush tool. Now the problem before was that we had the multiply effect on. So let's come over here and change this from multiply to normal. And now we should be able to come in here and brush away some of that shadow. And there we go. As you can see, I'm brushing some of it away. And that's okay, but that's kind of, I don't know, that's making it look a little fake now. Let's undo that. Let's step back over that. I'm going to hit Control-Alt-Z and back over that. Let's drop our opacity a little bit. Let's bring this down to maybe, oh, I don't know, about 50%. Let's try that again. Let's see, there we go. That's a little lighter. There we go. Remember, you can play with your different settings, your opacity and stuff like that. And there we go. And you could spend your time and make this look much, much better, of course. All right, let's undo that. Let's step back over that. Put it back the way that it was before. Another setting to keep in mind is the flow setting over here. Now, flow controls how fast the ink flows out of the brush. If you think of it like one of those soap sponges where you fill the handle up with the soap and then the soap kind of squeezes out. Picture your brush the same way. Now, we're set to 50% right now, which means that if I were to draw, that's a 50% flow right there. Let me undo that. And if we set this up even higher, to let's say 100%, all right, the ink flows out much faster. Now, we can set this down to something like 10% or 5% if you just want to do some light touch-ups. Let's go to 7%. And now watch this. Notice how the ink, I'm not quite getting as dark quite as fast. The ink is flowing out a little bit slower, so I've got more time to ease into that there, and I can just lightly go over some areas without it becoming totally yellow really quick. And with a mixture of a 50% opacity and a 7% flow, see how I'm kind of brushing over it? There we go. And of course, it's kind of rough right now, but you can take your time and make this look really good. I'm going to revert back to where we were before, the original Ducky. File, and then revert. And I want to show you one more setting for fun. Let's put some hair on Ducky. Let's put some red hair on him. So I'm going to come over here and pick the eyedropper tool, and we'll pick up the red from his beak. And let's pick our brush tool again, brush. Now from the brushes, let's drop the brushes down. And I'm going to come down to one of these spatter brushes. Let's go with this one here. And watch, I can just kind of click and drag some light wispy hair on them. See? Now notice if I kind of hold my mouse down, nothing really happens. But if you come over to the right here, there's an airbrush button. I'm going to click that down, and now watch what happens if I just hold my mouse still. Notice how it's darkening. That's because the airbrush is flowing. All right? If you increase the flow rate here, let's increase the flow rate. You'll notice it happens much more quickly. See, watch. If I hold the mouse still, watch right here. See how it's like it's being airbrushed in instead of just one spatter? Let's undo some of those. Right now I can kind of airbrush over him a little bit more. There we go. So there's some red hair on Ducky. The airbrush setting is easier to appreciate with a larger brush. Let's bring the brush size way up. And then you can click and see how if I just click lightly, nothing, you get one little bit of spatter, but if I hold it down, notice how it darkens in. We can even pick a darker color too. Let's go with like a blue, like a dark blue. And watch, just one click. See how it kind of fills in. So that's airbrushing. And all you have to do again is just click on the airbrush icon on the toolbar. Let's go ahead now and close down Ducky. Do we want to save changes to Ducky? I'm going to say no. Otherwise it'll save all this stuff that we did to Ducky in the file. Let's click on no. And that will close Ducky down. In the last lesson, we showed you how to make some changes to your Ducky image. In this lesson, we're going to show you how to edit some real small details in photographs. Let's begin this lesson by opening up the eagle photograph. I'm going to click on File and then Open. And in my samples, I'm going to find the eagle photograph. There's the sample. And I'll click on Open. Now what I'd like to do in this image here is I would like to just change the shade of the eagle's eye, the area around his pupil. Maybe instead of that light yellow, let's go to maybe like a light red or something just slightly different. And this is a technique that you'll use a lot of the times to make small adjustments to your photographs, perhaps removing red eye. Now the first thing that we need to do is get a little closer to that eye. We're out kind of far right now, and it's easier to work on stuff if you can zoom in and see the details. So let's come over to our toolbox, and let's click on the Zoom tool. And notice how my cursor is now changed to a little magnifying glass. Let's click right on the eye, and that'll zoom us in. And you can keep clicking on it, and it'll keep zooming you in. We'll get closer and closer. And there we go. Now we're up nice and close to it. If you want to zoom out, simply hold down the Alt key and notice how the magnifying glass changes from a plus to a minus. You can click and then zoom back out again. But we want to zoom in, so we'll zoom back in there. Alright, let's make sure we have our brush tool on. And let's drop this down. I'm going to go with my airbrush soft round 50% flow. Now let's change our color to a light red. Let's come down here and change the color. Let's go with red, and let's go with a light red up here. And I'll hit OK. And notice now, though, that my circle here, my brush size is huge. So let's drop that brush size down. Let's drag that down here. Maybe 5 pixels. Because remember, we're zoomed in now. That's better. And then we can just kind of click in here to give them a little bit of a pinkish reddish tint. And I'm just clicking individually. Now we're set to normal right now. If I were to set myself to the multiply mode, it might go in a little better. Let's step back over this. I'm going to Control Alt Z and step back over all these changes. Control Alt Z, back, back, back. And let's change this from normal to multiply. Remember, multiply kind of adds the effects together with the background color. There we go. That looks a little better. Now with the multiply, instead of getting that exact pink, we're kind of getting like a reddish hue in there. There we go. That's more what I was looking for. Now let's zoom out and see what it looks like. Let's click on the Zoom tool, and then I'll hold down the Alt key and zoom out. And there. My eagle has a reddish colored eye. Now if you like to zoom a lot, you might also find the Navigator palette helpful. Let's click on Window and then Navigator. This is one of those palette windows that was open earlier in the class, but I had to close it. Let's go ahead and click and zoom in here with our zoom tool. And notice the little red box changes over here in the Navigator window. Let me zoom back out again. I'm going to hold down my Alt key and zoom back out. Notice the size of that red box is showing you what's over here in the actual window. Now you can take your mouse and move it over here and click and drag that box around so that you can change where you are on the image. And the more you're zoomed in, the smaller that box gets. That way you can drag around. You can also use this slider down here, the zoom slider, to zoom in and out. See how I'm zooming in and out really easily? Just by dragging that slider. Or you can zoom here with this zoom in button or the zoom out button here. You can also type in a percentage, like 50, and press enter. Let's zoom in some more. While you're zoomed in as well, there's also a hand tool right here on the toolbox. You can click on the hand tool and then click and drag right in the image itself. And then zoom back out. While you have the hand tool on, you can right-click on the picture and select Fit on Screen. And that will make the size of the picture fit whatever size monitor you have. It'll either shrink it or make it grow so that you can see the whole image on the screen all at once. And again, that was right-click, Fit on Screen. Actual pixels will reduce it to its original size or increase it to its original size depending on your image. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and close this navigator window. And let's go ahead and save our work. Now I'm going to click on File and then Save As. Now this opens up the Save As window, and it's asking you for a file name. Eagle.psd is the original file name. Now you may or may not see PSD here, depending on your settings in Windows. It might just say Eagle, and you might not see the file extensions up here in the Save As window. We'll talk about what these extensions are in just a moment. What I would like you to do is down here, under Save Options, click on where it says As a Copy. That'll change the file name to eaglecopy.psd. And this way you're not going to save over the original Eagle file. The original Eagle will still be there and won't be changed. That's just a simple, easy way of making a copy. You can change this file name to whatever you want. Right? You can call this Rick's Eagle Copy, for example. Now the format here says Photoshop, PSD or PDD. There are a whole bunch of different formats in here that Photoshop can work with. We'll talk about these formats in just a moment. Notice how they all have the different extensions. There's CompuServe GIF, GIF, there's JPEG, there's PCX. Again, we'll talk about all these in just a moment. But for now, let's stick with a Photoshop image, which is the original format that the image was in. And let's pick Save. Now I've saved the Eagle as a copy, but notice I still have the original Eagle right here. I saved my Eagle as a copy, so now there's a Rick's Eagle copy, but I'm still working with the original Eagle file. So the copy is nice to do if you want to save maybe multiple steps while working on an image. If I wanted to load up that other one now, I could just simply close Eagle. Do I want to make changes to the Eagle PSD, the original one? I'm going to say no. And then I'll go File, Open. And open up my Rick's Eagle copy from right here. And there it is. So use the Save a Copy as when you want to make a copy of your image. Now let's talk a little bit about image formats that I mentioned a minute ago. These are the 4 most popular image formats that you're going to see while working with Photoshop. Now there are a ton of different image formats, but these are the big ones. A PSD file is a Photoshop document. Now, PSD is the default format for Photoshop. All of the image data, all the information about your image, the picture, changes, layers, which we haven't talked about, all that stuff will be saved in your Photoshop document. The problem is you can only see a Photoshop document if you're working with Photoshop if you have Photoshop on your computer. So it is not a portable format. It's not a format that you can give to someone else. Then we have Windows bitmaps, BMP files. Windows bitmaps save all the picture details as far as colors and such, but they're huge. They're not compressed at all. So Windows bitmaps are a poor choice for saving images on the web. The two most popular formats for web pictures are GIFs and JPEGs. Both are compressed images. Compressed means the picture is squeezed down so the file size is smaller. Of course, if the file size is smaller, then the image can be displayed quicker on a web page or can be transmitted quicker to someone in an email or some other form of transfer. Now, GIFs are good for clip art. JPEGs are usually used for photos. GIFs don't have a lot of color depth, so you can only see a limited number of colors. That's why GIFs are better for things like company logos or clip art. JPEGs are good for photographs. The problem with JPEGs is that every time you edit and save a JPEG, you lose a little bit of information. So if you're going to be editing JPEGs, make sure you save the original image somewhere safe, because you want to make changes to it. Every time you change your JPEG, the image degrades a little bit. The best thing to do is to open up your image and save it as a Photoshop document, save it as a PSD. And then any time in the future you want to make changes, go back to that PSD file, make changes to the PSD file, and then save it in whatever format you want, like a GIF or a JPEG to be used on the web. Now again, you may or may not see these file extensions when you open up Photoshop or Windows Explorer. This is something I show you how to do in one of my Windows courses, to turn those extensions on so they're visible. But at this point, don't worry, it's not that important. Just keep in mind what these image formats are when you see them when you're saving your graphics. So if we wanted to take this Rix Eagle Copy PSD and save it to be used on the web, we can click on File. Now we have Save As and Save for Web. We'll talk about Save for Web in a future lesson. For now, just pick Save As again, and then come down here to Format, and I would select JPEG, and then click Save. Now you're given some options here under JPEG Options. Just stick with the defaults for now and click OK. And now we've saved a copy of this Rix Eagle Copy.psd as a JPEG. And we could open that up by going to our Samples folder, File, Open. And notice there's two of them here. There's the PSD and there's the JPEG to be used on the web. Let's double click on it, and there it is. And the two look virtually identical. One is a JPEG and one is the original Photoshop image. Now if I wanted to make changes in the future, I would make changes to my original PSD file and then save those again to a JPEG. Let's go ahead and close both of these down. In this lesson, we're going to see how we can add text to our graphics. Let's start out with an easy example. Let's click on File, and then Open Recent, and let's open Ducky again. Now let's put the word quack right here. So I'm going to come down and find the text tool, or the horizontal type tool as they call it. Notice my mouse cursor has changed. I'm going to draw a box right about here, and I'm going to type in the word quack. And there we go. Now notice I've got that pinkish color because that's the color right there. So if you want to change the text, you want to change the text color, we'll need to highlight the text now. Click on the color, and let's change it to blue. And then I'll hit OK. And then we can click off of it, and there we go. Now the color is blue. You can change a lot of the different attributes as far as the font size, and all that from the options bar. Of course, the options bar is right here. Now again, you have to highlight the text first, and then we can change the font, the size. Right? We have smooth, crisp, strong, and so on. This is how the text will appear. Now if you want to move this text, come over here and click on the Move tool, and then you can click on the text and drag it where you want to. Like right there, for example. So that is the Move tool. If after you've moved it you decide you want to edit it, just click on the Text tool again, and then click right on it, and you can continue to edit it. You can resize this box by grabbing any of these little blocks on the corners. This one here, for example, we can slide it up and make the box a little smaller. And then I'll move it back over. And then edit it some more. Click. Maybe make this box a little smaller. Slide it over some more. There we go. And that's how you can edit the text and the box. You can also rotate this text. Notice if I move my mouse over here, my mouse pointer turns into like a curved arrow. You can click and drag to rotate. Now if you're trying to straighten it back out again, and you can't quite get it to be perfectly horizontal, hold down the Shift key, and that will lock it right on at 45-degree angles. And there we go. There's our quack. Let's do something a little more complex. Let's close this down. Save changes? No. And let's open a different photo. Go to File, Open, and let's open up the palm tree. This palm tree CMYK. There's a preview. Let's hit Open. That's a nice, beautiful picture. Let's put right down here the name of our beach resort, for example. So I'll pick the Text tool, and I'll draw a box right here. And let's put in here ABC Beach Resort. And it doesn't quite fit in the box that I've made, so let's make the box a little bit bigger by clicking and dragging and resizing. And the first thing I want to do is I want to change this color of this. Let's change the color of this text to match the beach sand over here, for example. So let's highlight the text, and I want to change the color. So let's click on the color box, and now what I want to do is, instead of clicking on a color up here, bring your mouse down, and notice how if you're over the picture, you've got an eyedropper. Let's pick this color right here from the light sand, and look at that. The color picker palette flipped over to match that color of the sand. Let's hit OK. And let's see what we got now. Let's click over here. And there we go. Now it says ABC Beach Resort. But I don't really like that down here over the water. Let's move it up into the sky. So let's pick the Move tool, and then we'll click and we'll drag it up here into the sky. ABC Beach Resort. There we go. Now I've decided that, yeah, it looks nice there, but I really don't want it there. I want to get rid of that ABC Beach Resort altogether. So how can I get rid of it? Well, in order to delete that, you have to understand what a layer is. You can think of layers like transparent pieces of glass sitting one atop the other. Our picture of the palm tree is on the background layer, the very bottom. And sitting on top of that, we have a piece of glass with ABC Beach Resort written on it. When I use the Move tool and I slide this around, it's like I'm sliding that piece of glass over the background. You can see these layers on the Layer palette. Let's go to Window and come down to Layers. Again, this is one of those palettes that was open earlier, and I had to close it. Notice we have two layers. We have our background layer, and we have the ABC Beach Resort layer. Now there are a bunch of different options in this palette. We're not going to talk about all of them in this course. But if you want to get rid of one of these layers, like this ABC Beach Resort, all you have to do is come over here, click on the layer, and either click and drag it down to this trash can down here, or right-click on it and go to Delete Layer. Are you sure you want to delete the ABC Beach Resort layer? Say yes, and then it's gone. And now we're back to just our background layer. Anytime you add text or another object that we'll talk about in just a minute, you're adding on another layer. And again, think of the layers like you're stacking transparent pieces of glass. You can move the layers independent of each other, copy and paste them, and do all kinds of neat things with layers. Layers make your graphic much more powerful. You can edit stuff on one layer without adjusting the others. And again, we'll talk a lot more about layers and what you can do with them in future classes. Let's get that layer back by going Edit, Undo, Delete Layer. That'll put that layer back. And let's say I want, in addition to the name of the resort, I want the phone number on here as well. Now you can copy and paste these layers. For example, I'm going to click on Layer and then Duplicate Layer. Duplicate the ABC Resort as, let's call it phone number. And then I'll hit OK. Now if you look at the Layers palette, you can see two of them on here. Nothing appears to have changed over here, but watch this. I'm going to click and drag, and oh, look at that. I'm sliding that layer independent of the other ones, right? I can click on the ABC Beach Resort layer, and now I'm sliding that one. All right, so I'm going to slide the ABC Beach Resort up just a hair. I'll click back here on the phone number layer. Notice the brush. That's the one you're editing. All right, now I can come over and get my text tool and edit the second one and put the phone number in there. And of course I can highlight it and change the color. Resize the box. And everything that I do on this layer will not affect the other layers. Now notice how this box is flying off the side here. You can make your picture, your image, your canvas it's called, bigger by simply grabbing the side. It's not going to affect the actual image itself, but it affects your size of your picture here. There we go. And now I can get the edge and resize these boxes to fit. I can now use my Move tool and slide it wherever I want it. So that's a brief introduction to how layers work. Notice I have three layers here: my background, my beach resort, and my phone number. And you can hide these with the little eyes here. They're still there. The layer still exists, but maybe you don't want to see one layer, see what the picture looks like without it. You can hide those layers, even the background. Let's go ahead and close this. Save changes, let's say no. And we can also close our layers palette as well. In this lesson, we're going to learn about Photoshop's powerful selection tools. Let's start off this lesson by opening up our good pal Ducky again. File, Open Recent, and then Ducky. Now, if you want to move stuff around, pieces of a picture, for example, there are selection tools to allow you to select what you want to move. Let's start out with the most basic way to move something. We'll use the rectangular marquee tool and draw a box around Ducky's lips. That's a rectangular marquee. Now you might be tempted to just click and drag that marquee, but unfortunately that just moves the marquee. It moves the selected region. So let's put that back where it belongs. To move Ducky's lips now, you'd need to grab the Move tool, and then you can move Ducky's lips. And there we go. I'm going to undo that, or step backwards, because I don't really want to move Ducky's lips with the marquee tool. Because you can see what happens is it takes a lot of the rest of Ducky out with it. All right, that's not a big deal. Let's see what else we got. Let's click and hold this button down, and now you can see some other marquee tools. Here's an elliptical marquee tool. Let's pick that one. And wait a minute, I still got this rectangular marquee in here. Well, if I click and drag another marquee, it erases the previous one. Okay, so that's fine. So let's try and move one of Ducky's eyes. There we go. I drew an elliptical marquee, or basically a circle, around one of Ducky's eyes. And again, I can use the Move tool and move Ducky's eye. We'll give Ducky a different eye in a different spot. Now let's undo that as well. There are also two other marquees in here, single row and single column. That's if you want to get a single row or a single column. I seldom use these myself, to be honest. Now down below the marquees are the lassos. Now lassos are a little more useful if you really want to grab something. So I'll pick the lasso tool, and again, let's see if we can get Ducky's mouth. I'm going to now click and drag and draw using the lasso tool. I'm dragging with my mouse. And draw a line right around Ducky, and there we go. And now I've used the lasso and I've drawn right around Ducky's mouth. Oops, I just moved it again. Let's try and put it back where it was. It's tough to remember that, especially if you're used to using some other drawing programs. Once you draw a selection around something, usually you can click and drag it. But you can't do that with Photoshop. We have to pick the Move tool, and then we can move Ducky's lips. And so that's a little bit better. But we still got some stuff around there, so let's put that back. Let's see what else we got in here. Let's click and hold down the lasso button. Click and hold it down. We've got the lasso tool, the polygonal lasso tool. What's that do? Well, the polygonal lasso tool, let's try and get us around Ducky's entire head. Watch this. Let you go click and then draw a line. Let's go up to here and then click and then draw another line. Click and then another line. Click. And see how we can draw little endpoints around Ducky's head to try and get as close to it as we can. Click. Click, click, let's come down here, click, 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 and of course the smaller steps that you make, the more your polygon will resemble Ducky's head. I'm making some pretty big steps here, but you can go real small, click, and then when you get back to the beginning, notice how a circle pops up. See the lasso tool? If I move next to it, look at, I get a circle. That means it's going to close the polygon, and there we go. And now I can use the Move tool, and I've got most of Ducky's head. I can move Ducky's head back here, for example. So that's the polygon tool. And don't forget, you can also zoom in while you're doing that. pick the zoom tool, and you could zoom right in. Let's say you want to get just Ducky's eye. You can zoom in here, get your lasso tool, right, your polygonal lasso tool, and you can click as close to Ducky's eye as you can. Get all the way around Ducky's eye. There. I'm going to zoom back out. Now there's one more that's really neat. If you hold down the lasso tool, there's the magnetic lasso tool. Now the magnetic lasso is really neat. The way the magnetic lasso works is it looks for areas of high contrast, and it snaps the polygon lines down right next to it. Watch, I'm going to click here, and it found a region of high contrast. Now just drag the mouse along the edge of Ducky, and look at that. See how it's putting the edge down automatically for us? See that? I'm just dragging the mouse. Don't hold the mouse button down. And it's automatically making those endpoints for me along the areas of high contrast. And that's really neat, because all you have to do is just take the mouse and kind of lightly trace around Ducky. And there it goes. See that? Bring it all the way down along Ducky's body. Down along the underside. Look at how it's just putting it down for me. And then back up to the top and right there, and we're connected. And that's how the magnetic lasso works. And now that I have Ducky selected, I can click on my Move tool and slide Ducky wherever I want. Now let's unselect Ducky. I'm going to click on Select and then Deselect. It will unselect everything and put us back to normal. Now here's a really neat tool. Watch this. This guy here is called the Magic Wand. I'm going to click on the Magic Wand and then click on Ducky's head. And look at what it did. It selected most of Ducky for me. The Magic Wand attempts to make a selection of roughly areas of all the same color. So now let's see what happens if I try to move this. Look at that. See how it grabbed all the stuff that's roughly this yellow color? Let's put that back. Now you can make changes here with the Magic Wand. For example, the tolerance. That determines on how closely to the color that you clicked on the selection has to be. For example, let's deselect that. Let's change the tolerance to 30 and click. And notice how it was a little less tolerant. This yellow region here is a little bit different than this darker yellow region here. And you can increase the tolerance or decrease it accordingly. If you go down to 10 and you click, let's say here, it's only going to get a really small area. You can go anywhere from 1 to 255. If you pick 200, for example, it got most everything. It was a lot more tolerant. Let's drop this down to, say, 50 and click. And there we go. That's the Magic Wand tool. Let's deselect. And let's set this back to 100. And click on Ducky's lips. And there we go. It's an almost perfect selection of Ducky's lips. Now we can use the Move tool and really move Ducky's lips. So that's the Magic Wand. Now you might have two regions, like these two black eyes here, that you might want to move together. Use the Magic Wand, click on the first black eye, hold the Shift key down and click on the second one. And now I've got them both together. And I could probably also grab the whites of their eyes as well. Yep, there we go. White and white right there. And maybe the lips too. As long as you hold the Shift key down, it will add to your selection. Use the Move tool, and we'll slide Ducky's eyes and lips over there, or duck bill as it is. I'll undo to put that back. Let's deselect. Let's say we want to give Ducky a third eye, right in the middle of his forehead. I'll use the Magic Wand. Click here. Hold the Shift key down. Click on the white region. I'm going to copy that to my clipboard. So I'm going to go Edit, and then Copy. And now I'm going to paste it. Edit, Paste. And what happened? Although nothing appears to have happened, Photoshop actually pasted a copy of the eye right over the image. And watch this. If you use your Move tool, you can move the eye right off of that one and stick it right up there. Now Ducky's got another eye. What happened was it actually created a new layer. Whenever you copy and paste something, it creates a new layer with that pasted image on it. If you click on Window and come down to your Layers palette, you'll see that we have two layers now. We have our background and our layer 1. Let's hide the background, and you can see there's layer 1. That white and gray check region just means that it's transparent. We'll talk about that in a future class. Let's close the palette. And so now we've copied and pasted it, and we're looking at two layers here. Now, if you don't know what cut, copy, and paste are, again, I recommend you take one of our Windows Basics courses. We cover cut, copy, and paste there. Cutting something is like snipping it out with scissors and then pasting it to a new location. Copying it is the same thing, but it's making a copy of the original, and you can paste it somewhere else as well. You can find cut, copy, and paste under the Edit menu up top here. Cut, copy, and paste. Or you can use the Control keys. Control C is copy, Control X is cut, Control V is paste. And again, we'll do a lot more with cut, copy, and paste in a future lesson. For now, let's go ahead and close Ducky down. Save changes, I'll say no. Let's review what we learned in today's class. We learned about the parts of Photoshop, how to open images, create new images. We showed you how to use the brush tool and to change the brush options. We learned about colors, changing your colors, using the Eyedropper tool to pick up a color from the existing graphic. We showed you how to edit images, how to zoom in, how to move around, how to make minute changes to your images. We showed you how to add text to your image. We learned how text and other objects that we cut and paste work on layers, like transparent sheets of glass on top of each other. We work with some of the selection tools, the lasso tool, the magnetic lasso tool, the magic wand tool. We covered a lot of material today. Now it's time for your skills check. Head on over to our website, 599cd.com/test. You can take our Photoshop 101 skills check quiz, and if you pass, you can print out your certificate of completion for this course. What course is next? Visit our website at 599cd.com/Photoshop to find the next course in the series for you. Thank you. We hope you have enjoyed this class. If you have any questions, you can send them to us via our website at 599cd.com/contact. If you need technical support and have questions about the material covered in today's class, you can contact one of our instructors at techsupportdirect.com. Every caller gets a free 3-minute phone call with one of our consultants. 3 minutes doesn't sound like a lot of time, but it is. We can either point you in the right direction or answer your question completely. This lesson is copyright 2003 by Amacron Computing, all rights reserved. This video may not be reproduced, copied, edited, or otherwise distributed without the express written permission of Amacron Computing.
That was Photoshop 7 101, brought to you by ComputerLearningZone.com. Again, my name is Richard Rost. If you're interested in more Photoshop classes, please post a comment below or visit my website, ComputerLearningZone.com. I've got a lot more Photoshop 7 lessons available on my website, and I'm willing to give them out for 50% off. Just send me an email and let me know that you're interested. And again, my name is Richard Rost, and my email is posted in the description below the video. Thanks for watching.